Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Thursday morning, August the 10th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Good one for you today. Later on in the show, you're going to hear from Ira Schoffel. We're going to talk a little bit about running backs. You're going to hear from offensive coordinator, well, should I say co-offensive coordinator, Randy Sanders, and, of course, quarterback coach Gene Williams. Got to catch up with him on Media Day. You can see that in video form right now on warchant.com. But we figured we would play that audio for you today because, well, interviews with the assistant coaches come at a premium at Florida State, so whenever you get to hear them, we certainly like to pass them along to you guys. And speaking of you guys, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 97.9 ESPN Radio at 6 in the morning here, streaming live over the airwaves, or, of course, the WTSM app. The TuneIn Radio app works as well. Podcast, iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com. YouTube seems to be back under normal conditions. Apologize for the brief couple-day inconvenience there, but everything seems to be running smoothly there as well. And, of course, you want to contact the show, radio@warchant.com. That's the place to do it. At Wake Up War Chant, if you prefer to do things over Twitter instead of email, all your comments, your questions, your concerns, whether they be about the show, whether they be about Florida State, you can ask them all right there. We certainly do appreciate it. Of course, we are brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, and Township, all there right in the heart of College Town. You know where they are right now. Hippest spot in Tallahassee. Well, I sounded really old saying something like that. Yeah, say, it's a real hip spot, say. But, of course, you know about MadSo. You know about Central. You know about Township. They're great. They sponsor us. We can't do this without them, and we certainly do appreciate it. And, of course, finally, you want to be a premium member of warchant.com. I've been doing this at the beginning of the show instead of in the middle of the show because I feel like right off the bat it's important to tell you we have a really good deal for you. And I say that objectively, not as somebody trying to sell you a product. If you're looking to subscribe to a premium site, entering in a promo code and getting 6 months free plus a $25 gift card to Garnet and Gold plus a War Chant t-shirt plus a War Chant tumbler, all with a year subscription, that's good stuff. And hop on that if you can. It's limited, but you know that promo code at checkout when you sign up for a year. It's Knowles, capital N-O-L-E-S, 2017. Knowles 2017. I mentioned it. Ira Schoffel is going to join us later on in the program and talk about running backs currently at Florida State. But to start off the show, I thought it would be a little interesting to look at Florida State maybe compared to their opponent that they're going to play on September 2nd, of course, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and running backs because, well, running backs are in the news. Devontae Freeman signs an extension with the Falcons. He becomes the highest paid running back in the NFL. $41.25 million is how much that extension pays out. That's an annual average of $8.25 million over the life of this 5-year deal. That beats out LaVon Ball in Pittsburgh, who ends up with that $12.1 million offer that he's expected to accept later. Of course, he is in Pittsburgh under a franchise tag. Of course, first of all, congratulations to Devontae, who, by all accounts, I know every time I've interacted with him, I had him back in college. He was nice enough to actually come on our campus radio show back when he was just getting a start in the NFL, was a great guy, graciously sat down, gave us a half hour, one of the real, genuine, good dudes that it's been my pleasure to encounter. And you love seeing good things happen to good people, so you tip your cap to him, first of all. And second of all, I find it kind of interesting to see Florida State's more known as the quarterback school. Despite Dalvin Cook, despite Devontae Freeman, James Wilder Jr., they've had great running backs over the years under Jimbo Fisher, but it's considered the quarterback offense, right? Because Jimbo Fisher is considered the quarterback guru. Meanwhile, Alabama is the school that's known as the running back school, right? Because of the Heisman Trophy winners they've had at running back, and it seems like there's that featured back every year. I do find it kind of interesting, though, with all the hype and all the pomp and all the circumstance around Alabama running backs. And there was a lot of hype around Dalvin Cook, and people liked Devontae Freeman, but people didn't consider Devontae Freeman a first-rounder. People weren't clamoring to draft Devontae Freeman when he came out and went to the NFL. I think it's kind of funny that you've seen over the years now, especially if Dalvin Cook is what a lot of the folks think he can be in Minnesota, how Florida State running backs have kind of had the better tenure in the NFL over Alabama running backs. And I think that's twofold. I think part of it goes with they didn't have the pomp, they didn't all have the circumstance, and they didn't all have the hype. You know, Chris Thompson wasn't a first rounder. Trent Richardson was. Devontae Freeman wasn't. Derrick Henry was. There's so much that goes into if you don't perform at this level when we draft you in the first round, we don't want you, you're a bust, you're this, you're that, whatever. I do think part of it's that, and I think the other part is something we're going to get back into with Ira Schoffel coming up in the next segment, the idea of running back by committee. The idea that the way Florida State has run the ball traditionally, of course Dalvin Cook was an exception, gives these guys so much more tread, and it gives these guys so many more miles that they can give to the league and the NFL in a position that now that Ezekiel Elliott's made it cool again, despite what he is on or off the field, no matter what your thought of his is, let's face it, 3-4 years ago, we were talking about the big narrative in the NFL is we're talking about the game without a running game. We're talking about this is, you know, a full passing league. This is going to look like the Big 12 in 10 years. Forget about it. And now, because everything is cyclical in football, everybody wants a strong running game again. Tennessee's trying to build a strong running game. Jacksonville's trying to build a strong running game. Minnesota has made a reputation off a strong running game, and now they're trying to replace Adrian Peterson with Dalvin Cook and keep that up. Dallas has done that. It's what's old is new again. And I think the way Florida State does things, the way that they're able to keep guys by committee, the way that it wasn't just Chris Thompson. It was also Chris Thompson, but you had a fully capable college running back in Ty Jones, and you had a fully capable college running back in Jermaine Thomas. Not exactly guys who panned out in the league, but they were serviceable for what you needed them to do. When you look at James Wilder Jr. and Carlos Williams, who things didn't pan out for them at the next level completely, but when it's not just Devontae Freeman, and it's not just that guy getting 25, 26, 27 carries a game, when you can spread that load and you can keep that talent up, it's certainly a good thing. And again, something else we're going to talk about with Ira, the depth of this year's squad seems pretty hopeful to keep that up with the Florida State Seminoles. All right, folks, let's get you caught up on all the scores going on around Major League Baseball and actually a little bit of football to talk about. This is Why You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning. Wake up! Wake up! Wake me up!
Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
As I said, we start with the National Football League, and we start with a Florida State Seminole. It's the Carolina Panthers victorious in preseason at home over the Houston Texans. One of those touchdowns that Carolina ends up tossing is into the arms of Mr. Kelvin Benjamin, who, despite maybe coming to camp a little overweight, people may be thinking he's a little chunkier than he should be, seemed to look pretty good in every catch that he got. I believe he ends up with 2 catches on the night. Of course, one of them ends up going for a score, and it's pretty impressive. Hop up there and get it. So you tip your cap to him, and of course, 27-17 for a Carolina Panther team that's looking for a rebound year. In Major League Baseball, it's the Rockies over the Indians, 3-2, and that one goes to extras in 12 innings. In Cleveland. Rangers over the Mets 5-1. Mariners over the A's 6-3 in Oakland. Angels win at home 5-1 over the Baltimore Orioles. 3-1. The San Francisco Giants get a win over the Cubs at home. Red Sox go to the Trop and take a game from the the Rays 8-2. The Nationals over the Marlins 10-1 at Nationals Park. 11-5, that's the New York Yankees over the Toronto Blue Jays up in Canada. The Reds at home, 8-3, victorious over the Padres. Phillies go into, I about said Turner Field. I know that's not right. SunTrust Park gets themselves a win over the Braves, 3-2. White Sox at home, 7-1 over the Houston Astros. On the road, Minnesota, 4-0 over the Milwaukee Brewers. Cardinals win at home, 8-5 over the Kansas City Royals. And the Dodgers get win number 80. Yeah, I said that right. Win number 80 over the Arizona Diamondbacks, 3-2. And finally, the Tigers victorious over the Pirates, 10-0. When we come back, Ira Schoffel and I chat about running backs on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, and Township, all there in the heart of College Town. So many questions about offensive line. As a matter of fact, we just got wrapped up with an interview you're going to hear tomorrow with Dr. David Castillo, of course, former Florida State center, no stranger to the activities at warchant.com. So many questions about the wide receiver. Ira and I talked about that a little bit earlier. And on in the week, you can go back and find that. But the one place that it seems like you feel like there would be the most questions after losing a dynamic player like Dalvin Cook, but there really don't seem to be many questions, is running back. And Ira Schoffel jumps aboard right now, the managing editor of warchant.com. Ira, you wrote an interesting piece throughout the week that I don't think comes as a surprise to anyone who's looked at that depth chart, but Florida State feels really confident about where they are at running back and how everybody's progressed.
Yeah, and I think that I remember having this conversation with people when Dalvin announced he was going to the NFL that, as big of a loss as that is, it's not like anybody's going to feel bad for Florida State. It's weird to say that because Dalvin Cook is the school's all-time leading rusher, has the top 2 seasons in school history, arguably the best running back in school history. And, so you lose a guy like that and you figure, okay, this is going to be a huge issue for this team. But really, in terms of depth, this is the deepest, probably most talented group of running backs Florida State's had in well over a decade, maybe longer, much longer than that. I just think you talk about, now, they may not have a frontline guy like Dalvin Cook. I don't know that – I certainly don't think Jaquez Patrick is going to be another Dalvin Cook. We don't know if Cam Akers will be or Kalon Laybourne or any of those young backs. But to have, basically 6 tailbacks that they really feel great about, it's a really encouraging thing. And the way Jimbo Fisher coaches running backs is he kind of likes to go with whoever has the hot hand. He's done that during his time at Florida State, but even going back to his days at LSU and other schools he's been at, he's willing to, it's not necessarily going to go with the same running back every game, every quarter. If somebody comes out and runs well, I think that he'll go with them. So having that many options, I think it's a really good thing for Florida State.
It's curious to me, Ira, that the one time in Jimbo Fisher's career where he really did kind of go away from a running back by committee approach is the one time where it kind of seems like he has stockpiled the most running backs. And I don't know if that recruiting pitch was, hey, Dalvin's going to be gone after 3 years and you're going to be a part of a big, big solution. But, you mentioned it. There are 6 guys on this roster who you genuinely feel okay with hitting the field at running back. And I just kind of think it's crazy that at this time, right now in Florida State's history, just coming off Dalvin Cook, that's when you have all these guys in the barrel. And that's not to say Florida State hasn't had depth before. I mean, you take a look at, of course, the Jermaine Thomas and Ty Jones complementing Chris Thompson. You take a look at Devontae Freeman and James Wilder Jr. and then sprinkled in with Carlos Williams. And then for the last couple of years, I mean, Jaquez Patrick will come in every now and then, but it's really been the Dalvin Cook show. So I'm interested to see what does running back by committee look like right now for Florida State, because it's something that hasn't happened in a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. The reason I never thought that I didn't think Dalvin would break Warwick Dunn's record is I just didn't know if, this was his single season record a couple of years ago. I didn't know if he'd get enough carries. I just figured that Jimbo, everywhere he's been, he's always been much more focused on being running back by committee. I mean, at LSU, he didn't have a lot of 1,000-yard rushers, but he had a lot of, guys that went on and played a lot of football in the NFL. And he would, you'd see a guy maybe rush for 1,000 yards one year and then only 650 the next year, and somebody else would run for 1,000. And he's always been very much, kind of rewarding who's playing well at that time. And, I think Dalvin Cook was the exception. And he was so much better than everybody else on the roster. And he played at such a high level week in and week out that he became the guy that kind of carried the ball, 90 to 95% of the time. But I think you're going to go back to traditional Jimbo Fisher offense now. I think it's going to be Jaquez Patrick to start. I think, it's kind of a reward for what he's done the last couple of years, and he's played well when he's gotten the opportunities. But I think Jimbo's going to sprinkle in carries for Cam Akers, Amir Rasul, Keelan Laybourne, maybe even Zaquandre White. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he tries to redshirt one of those guys, but I think he may. All those guys who are going to play, I think they'll all get carries. And then, if it's the second quarter of a game and Cam Akers has had the hot hand, I think he'll go with him. If it's the second half of a game and say Laybourne's had the stronger first half, he may go with him, or Patrick, whoever. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The other thing I asked Jimbo about this after practice on Tuesday was, are these guys more similar or are they more different? Because that might tailor things. If you feel like one of those guys is better between the tackles, one of them is better outside, one of them is better on toss sweeps, one of them is better in zone read, whatever the case is, that might kind of dictate things. But he said he kind of rattled off, I don't know, what was it, 10 or 12 things about those guys that he thinks they are all very similar. I think they may be kind of interchangeable.
And there's certainly a lot of different guys and a lot of different aspects of this game. And Jacquez Patrick being the number one, it makes sense. He's got the most seniority. He's certainly a good back. But it's kind of interesting to me that the guy who is, I don't want to say the bruiser, because he does have some speed to him. He can do some different things other than just lay his shoulder down. But he doesn't shy away from contact by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's kind of different that it looks like, even though Florida State's gone running back by committee over the Jimbo Fisher era, there's very much been more one guy who seems to get the more of the share than the others. And that's not to say that it's, 30 carries to 4 or something like that. But you know what I'm trying to say, Ira. There's, the 15 carry guy compared to 2 7-8 carry guys. That just kind of seems to be the blueprint that Jimbo Fisher has. It's going to be interesting to have a guy like Jacquez Patrick, at least early on, be the one who gets the carries, because that's not usually the back or the type of back that Jimbo Fisher uses as his guy who gets the lion's share.
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question with this whole thing is, Jacquez Patrick he's a really fascinating case study in the sense that he is a big back, but he didn't really come to Florida State running like a big back. He ran, he really used his elusiveness in high school, his agility, cuts in the open field, make guys miss, and he does have good speed. It wasn't like he just ran people over like a bulldozer in high school. It's not really what he did. And Jimbo has actually had to kind of really work with him, and Jay Graham, the running backs coach, have worked with him on running a little bit more physically. And he's accepted that. And I think you've seen more of that. But the thing is, at the high school level, if you're a big time Division I running back, more often than not, if you get in the open field and you get an edge on guys, you're going to be faster than anybody you play against, and you're going to run for touchdowns. Well, at this level, in Division I, at the highest level of college football, there's a lot of other guys who are fast on that defense. And what we've seen with Jacquez Patrick so far is, he can make guys miss the line of scrimmage. He can lower his pads and run through some arm tackles. He also can make people miss in the open field. For a big guy, he's more elusive than people think. What he doesn't have that Dalvin Cook had is that extra gear. He's not going to run away from defensive backs the way Dalvin Cook did. And so from that standpoint, you think, whereas a Dalvin Cook run that might have gone for 60 with Jacquez Patrick, maybe it goes for 25. And that's great. And you'd love to have a 25-yard run, and that's a big play. But, I remember when Jimbo signed Dalvin Cook, the first thing he said was, he's a guy that can change the numbers on the scoreboard from anywhere on the field. Well, Jacquez Patrick's probably not that kind of guy. Now, Amir Rasul is. When he was 15 or so, he had the fastest 100-meter time in the country for kids in his age group. I mean, he is a burner. I think Laybourne's got a lot of very good top-end speed. Cam Akers, Zaquandre White. I mean, those guys are probably more likely to be those guys that can go the distance. So that's what you have to kind of see is Jimbo happy and content to go with a guy who maybe has more positive runs, more in the 6 to 8 yard runs with very few losses, and also, shown good ball security, or does he feel the need to kind of go for maybe a more of a home run hitter?
Well, we certainly know Jimbo Fisher favors ball security above all. I mean, you've seen it in special teams. You've seen it in running backs. He's a guy who loves to take away risk in a football game. You see it sometimes in his conservative approach on fourth downs and things of that nature. It's all about risk aversion for Jimbo Fisher. It does make you think, though, by the end of the year, is Amir Rasul still the guy you think of as the home run hitter, or has a Cam Akers developed? Has Kalen Laborn developed? Because I'll be honest with you, we'll talk about them both, Ira, but Kalen Laborn has impressed me about as much as anybody I've seen on that field for the first week of camp.
Yeah, he is. And it's funny because, I think just because of the timing of things, he's kind of in the recruiting class, and then since signing day, he kind of took a little bit of a backseat to Cam Akers, and, really shouldn't. Cam Akers was rated by Rivals as the number 2 running back in the country. Laborn was rated as the number 1 all-purpose back because I think they saw him more as a guy who catches the ball out of the backfield, can do a lot more different things than just kind of run between the tackles. And but he was very highly rated. Both were 5-star guys. Akers got a little bit more attention, I think, because he was an early enrollee. So, you saw him all spring. There was a lot of time for a lot of buzz about him, whereas Laborn enrolls with the rest of the freshmen in the summer and, wasn't probably talked about as much as Cam Akers. But, I mean, I agree with you 100%. And what's interesting is, watching those guys at practice, which we're allowed to do for the first, few periods of practice, they all really run hard. I mean, and that includes, those guys, Quandre White, Deontay Sheffield, the other freshman who's a walk-on that turned down some scholarship offers to come walk on at Florida State. He also, they all run really hard. They're well put together. I think that was the other thing that's impressive to me. I just reflected back to some of the backs that have come in to Florida State as freshmen, and I don't remember this many guys that are this thick. They're well put together, big, strong thighs, thick in the waist. Just in the core, just real. They look like they're guys who are ready to play college football. And sometimes those running backs are a little bit more slight early on and kind of have to pack on some pounds. These guys don't need to do that. And like you said, Laborn in particular is very. You just look at his lower body, you can see that physicality.
How willing do you think Jimbo Fisher is if and when these guys get along in their freshman year? When do you think he starts to ease these guys in? Because as much as people want to talk about, Dalvin Cook coming on the scene in 2014, people kind of forget that it took a game where literally everybody in front of Dalvin was hurt for him to stick out and shine at the Carrier Dome in Syracuse.
Yeah, I think this is the way this schedule sets up. I think it's probably not ideal for that position and a couple other positions. It's not an ideal season opener for working in new players or new starters or first-time guys, if you don't have to. And I think that's why we're seeing Jimbo and Rick Trickett on the offensive line look to more experienced guys on the offensive line because you're opening up with Alabama. And I think at running back, again, I think Jaquez Patrick makes sense to get the most carries. That's probably – you would think with Florida State's defense as good as it's expected to be, you would think that's not a game that they're going to give up a ton of points where they need to get into a shooting match and score every time they touch the football. So maybe ball control is more important, maybe a veteran presence in the backfield. That's why I think Jaquez Patrick makes really perfect sense in that game. Maybe you give some of those guys a carrier here or there, but you just don't want to put the ball in the ground in a game like that or have a big 15-yard loss where a guy keeps kind of going east and west instead of north and south and has a big loss and changes field position. I think Jimbo's going to be cautious in that first game. Now, you come back in week 2 and you've got more of a breather. I think that's a game where you give a lot of those guys a good look. And then I think going forward, Miami and NC State are big games, but I think maybe you feel a little bit better at home giving some of those guys some opportunities. So I think by the end of the first month, I think whoever's going to get chances to carry the ball will have seen them some. And if they produce, I think they'll get more and more opportunities. But I just think in that first game, I think it's going to be Jacquez Patrick almost exclusively.
Ira, while I've got a couple more minutes with you, I did want to ask, outside of running backs, really quickly, Florida State's first scrimmage is this weekend. What do you really think overall Florida State is looking at learning in this first scrimmage?
I think the biggest thing probably is if you had to pick one thing, I'd say it's probably the offensive line. How they really match up, how just how they handle if Florida State's defensive line, if all those guys are healthy, how they handle that. Because, I think they got to figure out some things on that offensive line. I don't think it's set in stone what they've been doing so far. It's been pretty consistent. From what we've seen, it's been pretty consistent with, Eberle back at center, Rick Leonard at left tackle, Landon Dickerson and Cole Minshew at the guards, and then Derek Kelly at the other right tackle spot. That's kind of been what they've been working at. And, if they can hold up, against Florida State's defensive line in the scrimmage, I think that would be a really positive sign. In the open practice that we got to see on Sunday, several of the defensive linemen were limited, were given a kind of a day off. And even with that, the offensive line had some issues with pass protection. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then beyond that, I think maybe just the consistency of the wide receivers. Can that wide receiver core compete, play in and play out? Because, again, Nyquan Murray and Auden Tate, who Jimbo is really high on, and Keith Gavin, because of the way they played late last season, they also rarely had to be like the workhorses, play in and play out. And that's going to be the case now. So I think that's the other thing, is just seeing their focus level, their consistency. Can they do it for, 60 snaps as opposed to doing it maybe for 25 or 30 snaps?
It's kind of amazing to me how throughout the summer and now even 2 weeks into camp, the questions for this team have kind of remained consistent. And I'm getting to the point where I'm sure we'll learn a little at the scrimmage, but I really feel like completely offensive line and wide receiver-wise, we're just not going to know till they take the field. And maybe not even till after that because, when you open with probably the best team in college football, how many questions do you really have unless you just pass the test with flying colors? How many answers can you legitimately walk away with in terms of college football unless you just look great against the best team in the country?
Well, and the other thing about that is, the thing about these season openers, even against big time opponents, is sometimes you kind of get fool's gold in those games because, again, Alabama's number one in the country, not because of returning starters, not because of the overall experienced guys back. It's more so because of what Nick Saban's done and what that coaching staff has done in recruiting and how quickly they prepared players to fill holes because they've got a lot of question marks. So, that's a game where Florida State could look great in an area, and it turns out, well, maybe we overinflated what we expected from Alabama. So, and vice versa. There's a possibility that Alabama, if they exploited something in Florida State, you sometimes find out later that maybe you kind of inflated what you thought about the other team too. So, I don't think you're going to know everything you want to know about Florida State after that first game, but I do think that those questions, as you said, the questions about offensive line and wide receiver, they're going to be there until probably the first, 3 or 4 games because, again, just because, you have to see it consistently. It's one thing to have a good game. It's one thing to have a good scrimmage. But, after what we've seen the last year or two at the offensive line situation and then knowing what we know about the receivers, I don't think you can believe it. No matter how good things look or how encouraging things sound, I think it's one of those things. Those are things you kind of have to see to really believe.
I'm with you there, Ira. It's not going to be till week 3, 4, 5. Those Miami, those NC State games, those are the ones where you really get to figure out what this team's made out of. Regardless of what happens against Alabama, win, lose, or draw, you've got a tough schedule, and you have a really rough front half and a really rough back half. By the end of that front half, you need to know what you have going on.
Yeah, and I think they will. And again, I think that in some regards, having this Alabama game is a great thing because it does kind of, gives those players motivation during the off season, gets them ready. But also, it takes away the margin for error if you lose this game, even if it's a close game. Florida State, if they were to lose this game, I know Jimbo keeps talking about it's not the end of the world, and it's not. I still think they could get to the playoff with no problem if they won out. But now, if you had a second loss, it has to be the right second loss for you to get back in that playoff picture. I don't think you can lose at home to NC State or maybe even Miami and still get in the playoff. I think losing at Clemson, and if you lost at Clemson and Clemson had a great season, and if you lost to Alabama on a neutral site, I think you got a chance.
You'd have to win the ACC title, though.
And you'd have to win the ACC, exactly. So Clemson would have to lose a couple other games. But I just think that, that's the big problem with this game is if you lose it, it really reduces your margin for error. But there's a lot of good things about it as well because, like you said, we should know a good bit more about this team.
Good stuff as always, Ira. Look forward to seeing you out there at the practice field today. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, folks. Randy Sanders on the other end of this. Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Ryan Kelly here with you on Thursday, August the 10th. Ooh, this seems like, I don't know what it is. I think it's just because we're very, very close to football that when you're close to something you want, it just kind of seems like the days get longer, the anticipation builds. I think it's part that. I think it's just part how much, when fall camp starts, obviously in this job you're pretty busy. This seems like it's been a really long week. I don't know if you guys feel that. I don't know if it's, something in the water, but this just seems like it's been an incredibly long week. And when you have a long week like that, you tend to maybe go on out and have yourself a little happy hour. And, of course, our friends at For the Table will certainly have that for you from 4 to 7 tonight at Madison Social, Central, and Township. Of course, 3 completely different experiences, all right next door to each other, but still right there in the shadow of Doak Campbell Stadium. The location's great. Your friends are probably going to be there anyway. Go on out there, have yourself some fun with the best happy hour in town. We continue talking to some of the assistant coaches that we got to chat with on Media Day, including Florida State co-offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, Jimbo Fisher confidant, and you have to be a Jimbo Fisher confidant if he's going to let you touch his quarterbacks, and that is, of course, Mr. Randy Sanders, who is heading in. Our own Gene Williams got to talk with him on Fan Day about a variety of issues, and just because I like you so much, I'll give you that whole interview in its entirety. So without further ado, Coach Randy Sanders.
Florida State Media Day here with quarterback coach, co-offensive coordinator Randy Sanders. And Coach, you got a luxury this year because it's been a few years since you've had your starting quarterback back. How beneficial is that to, really the entire offense to have a guy back who knows what he's doing?
Well, number one, it's amazing how many years I've coached quarterbacks, and it seems like you've been trying to decide who's going to be your starter. So to have one of these years where you kind of know who the guy is, and he's proven, he's earned the team's confidence, he's earned the coaching staff's confidence. It's a really nice luxury to have. not only does it give you somebody as coaches to know who's going to be out there, the players get used to hearing the same voice. They get used to hearing the same cadence, the same way of checking, and the receivers are able to build the timing and the continuity with that guy. And plus, I think it just gives you a little more security when you go home at night and lay your head on the bed that you got a quarterback that can play.
We're talking to some of the wide receivers, and they said not so much maybe with you guys, but the off-season workouts. When they make a mistake, he gets on them and knows what to do. Where they didn't have that luxury a year ago. So I mean, really, working with the younger receivers, you don't have all those veterans. How helpful it is to have a veteran quarterback.
Well, very much so. And it's funny you mentioned that. I told someone earlier, one of the biggest changes in DeAndre last year, he knew when the guy messed up, but he wasn't secure enough in the fact that he knew it to go get on him. Mm-hmm. He still wasn't sure whether he truly knew it or he thought he knew it. But now he knows, and so it gives him the confidence to really step forward, be more assertive, and take that role. And he's done it since June. That was one of the things I challenged him with going into the summer was, you got to take charge. You got to be the guy now. If somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, you got to be the one that's going and finding them, and challenging them to take the next step and step up and do what they need to do.
Now, you don't need to worry about your starting quarterback, but obviously you need to get a solid number two because you've been around a lot. You can have to go those one play and you got to substitute the quarterback. I guess right now it's JJ. How's that going, and how's the other quarterbacks going?
Well, I've been pleased with JJ so far. JJ's obviously been around. He's going into his fourth year. He understands the offense. He knows kind of what's expected of the guy. The two freshmen, I think they're talented. They're good players. They're going to be good players. Their head spinning. There's so much to learn. They probably have 4 or 5 times as much to learn, 4 or 5 times as much to do, and they're seeing 4 or 5 times as many different things from the defense is what they're used to. And as soon as they feel like they got it, we throw something new at them. It's kind of an ongoing process. They're working hard. They're eager. They're talented, but we still got to keep going, keep making progress with them. I'm excited about what they can do, but it's what they can do. It's not what they have done at this point.
Best case scenario, you're able to redshirt those two guys and let them learn a little bit, not throw them out into the wolves right away?
Well, best case scenario, but who knows? As you said, you're one play away. I remember a few years ago at Kentucky, I had a year we had to start a game with we had to move a wide receiver because I had no quarterbacks left. I had 4 of them get hurt. I remember we're out of pregame warm-ups, and I got 3 SEC quarterbacks throwing to the receivers. Unfortunately, we were all coaching. I had nobody left in uniform. So those guys have to be ready. It's a tough position to be in, to be the backup quarterback, because you're always one play from playing, but you're not going to play unless A, somebody gets hurt, or B, you're usually way ahead. So it's a tough scenario to be in.
Now, jumping back to DeAndre, like you said, he's obviously improved in the leadership and a lot of the other roles that he needs to do. What is he still? What does he need to improve on from looking back to last season?
Well, there's no question, just understanding defenses, understanding what they're trying to accomplish, the strengths of each look, the weaknesses of it. I think the more he understands those things, the more he can anticipate. It can allow him to actually play faster. One of the things you always talk to quarterbacks, you got to play fast, but you can't rush. And the more you understand, the more you're able to see, process before the ball is snapped. Once you get the snap, you confirm what you're seeing, then you're able to play faster, but the game almost slows down because you're getting what you expect, or you know what to anticipate based on what you're seeing. And it just allows you to kind of process the game faster. Coach Fisher always talks about processing the game. The more you understand, the faster you can process.
Nothing to it. Obviously, he took a ton of hits last season. Is some of that maybe he needs to get rid of the ball quicker? Just from a fan or media perspective, sometimes it looks like he holds on to the ball too. I don't know. Is that accurate?
Well, there's certain times he held on to the ball. There's certain times we got to protect vector. There's certain times we got to run routes better. We got to be where we're supposed to be, and we got to do it on time. So it all fits together. You can't just lay everything at the feet of the offensive line, or sometimes running backs have to protect. Sometimes tight ends have to protect. Sometimes running backs, tight ends, receivers have to get into the routes and run them as he expects them to. There's a combination of things. You go back and look at the reason we got sacked or the reason he got hit. pretty much a combination of all those things. And hopefully him being a year older, some of our receivers being a little older, some of our offensive linemen being a little older, hopefully we'll be able to improve on those things. As a quarterback, you're going to get hit. It's football. Yeah. He goes out there and he's got on hip pads, shoulder pads, and a helmet just like everybody else. And you're going to get hit and you're going to take hits. That's just part of the game. But it's nice when he doesn't get hit as much as what happened.
Last thing I want to ask you about, obviously you looked at some film of Alabama, that defense. What jumps out to you about them?
Well, they're big, they're fast, they're very aggressive, they're very multiple. They do a lot of things. They obviously have a lot of confidence in what they do, and they're doing it with good football players. That's what jumps out at you. They're good. I think going against our defense every day in practice helps us prepare for a team like that, because our defense is big, fast, multiple, and talented. So it's a little bit of an advantage maybe that we have that some teams don't have, because we get to go against a similar type defense just from a physical standpoint. Not everybody has those kind of players, but it's going to be a tremendous challenge. They're a good football team. I think we're a good football team. It's going to be a fun game, but regardless, we still got 11 more games on the schedule. And one thing I learned a long time ago from Johnny Majors when I first started coaching at Tennessee, every game is important. Whether you win or lose, the next one's just as important. You beat Alabama, come back, lay an egg in the next game, then suddenly that was the biggest game of the year that you didn't show up for. So you got to show up, you got to play, regardless of what the name on the jersey is or what color the uniforms are. You got to approach them all the same, and if you can do that, then you have a chance to be consistent and successful.
Is it a little bit more of a chess match when it's that first game? You have the whole offseason prepared. Teams are more apt to throw a few wrinkles at you, I would guess.
Well, there's no question. 28 years, going on 29 years, seems like more first games are lost than are won, but by mistakes, turnovers, things like that. And it's going to be a chess match, there's no question. But it still gets down to whoever blocks the best, whoever tackles the best, whoever runs the ball, whoever doesn't turn it over, whoever kicks it the best. Those are usually the teams that win. And that's our challenge, to do all the fundamental things well and be physical, play fast, and just play like we know how to play.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Coach Sanders, appreciate it. Good luck this season.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're putting a bow on it. It's Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. Really short time to wrap it up here on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by For the Table. But before we run, my thanks to Ira Schoffel for joining us on the program. Of course, my thanks to Randy Sanders for talking to Gene Williams earlier on in the week. But I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't run and didn't say happy football to most of the state of Florida and most of the football fans here in the state. Our friends of the Pewter Persuasion are going to have to wait one more day. Tampa Bay doesn't play until tomorrow night against the Cincinnati Bengals, but Jacksonville, Atlanta, and Miami all in action tonight in preseason games. Two of those actually playing against each other. So go out, have a good time, and celebrate football. Sure, it doesn't mean anything. Sure, they're worthless. Sure, they're exhibitions, but you know what they are? They're football. Tune in tomorrow. I keep saying Mr., but I know it's Dr. David Castillo, former Florida State center, talks some offensive line with us. Mike and Mike's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.